Welcome to a brief history conspiracy.
This week, theories of Atlantis.
So yeah, I mean the thing I think about the Vatican Library.
Yeah,
So,
and is there a catalogue of the books that they even have in the library?
Not really.
To know what to request. Therefore, if there are hidden books, you don't even know
it's
that
limited.
those books exist.
And there is a section that nobody's allowed in.
Does the Pope get unrestricted access?
I should imagine so, but I'd learn Latin for that shit.
No, I'd
get
learn
in there
Latin and become the Pope just
Yeah.
to get into the vault.
Become the. You can have a life of pretending to be a Catholic
Just to get into the Vatican vault. Yeah, it's
if you're new to our channel, please consider subscribing and hitting a like on the video. It really does help us. So this was kind of popularised by an Edgar Cayce, who was a bit of a mystic and a prophet. He liked prophesying things.
Okay.
Apparently, he was called the sleeping prophet because he would be asleep and then ask questions, and his answers were prophets. So,
okay, with prophecies. Okay, so he's...
or
that's interesting,
he would pretend to be asleep.
Well, yeah.
Depending on whether you believe in clairvoyance or not. So, but he actually, quite annoyingly, got this right. He basically said that Atlantis was off the island of Bemini, and that a road to Atlantis would be discovered in around 1968, 1969. Then in 1968, divers found this road of Bemini, and it's about a mile long, and then it sort of hooks off at the end. It's believed to be a natural phenomenon, but it looks weird. It's these big 10 by 13 foot sort of blocks of different sizes, but blocks made out of limestone. Sorry.
Yeah.
And they're pretty bloody rectangular, and it looks man-made.
Okay. It's interesting if it seems more man-made than a natural formation.
Geologists think it is. It's a natural thing. You get lots of these sort of places, don't you? Like there was that place in India that's almost just a perfectly straight road, and that looks like big blocks again.
No, the land bridge that joins Sri Lanka and...
Yeah, I mean that's a natural
mainland
phenomena of two crustal things coming together or something. But I mean,
I'm not sure who's, but I think there's some theories in the ancient Indian Sanskrit texts.
Yeah.
Probably the Mahabharata about that road being built.
Yes, I know. Yeah.
By the gods.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it probably is a natural phenomenon. But again,
it could
would
be.
Look like it.
I'm not
when
sure
sea
on
levels
that,
were lower,
but,
and it was there, and you could walk across it. It would look like it was built, wouldn't it, for us, even if it is a natural phenomenon. But I always think about the Devil's Causeway in Ireland, and that looks mental.
Yes.
But it is a completely natural phenomenon.
Hexagonal formation. Yeah. It does look.
It looks unnatural, but it isn't. It's so these things do happen, and you can get these things at almost perfect straight lines when things push together. And Charles Berlitz, he argued that actually Atlantis was on the end of this Bemini Road, but it was swallowed by the Bermuda Triangle. So it's gone, or it's in a parallel universe or something. I don't really know where he thinks it's gone, but it was swallowed by the so.
There's a lot of theories about the Bermuda Triangle, and I guess we'll have to do that in depth as one individual conspiracy at a later date.
Well, there's a couple of famous ones we'll just have to touch on, wouldn't they? Like the aircraft, the World War II aircraft, just after it was at 46.
It's a more modern phenomenon, probably because we've only got records of people going missing in that area that date back so far. Because the people prior to that went missing in that area just went missing and nobody knew they'd gone. Yeah,
there are some really weird stories about the Bermuda Triangle, but I reckon statistically speaking, you don't get any more losses anywhere else in the world.
Really?
It's just that there's a high traffic, so you lose stuff goes down and things. But apparently, statistically, it's not relevant.
Okay.
But there are a few stories that are odd.
Oh yeah,
like that entire squadron of aircraft
the squadron in the 40s. Yeah.
But this Bemini Road's interesting. I don't think it's a man-made structure, but that doesn't mean it wasn't used as a road when sea levels. It's only about 18 feet below current sea levels.
Right.
We have to then assume that Atlantis was just off the American east coast. So, but possible. And then when we're talking about again Plato's thing about it being through the in the Atlantic,
Yeah, in line with the Pillars of Hercules.
Yeah, which is basically Gibraltar,
Straits
we
of Gibraltar, we think. Yeah.
So again, it would have lined up with what we're talking about, what Plato
Yeah,
talked
it
about.
was. Yeah, the Caribbean. Yeah.
Whether these different areas are true or not, we know that there are lots of areas that were land in this period. Doggerland is what we call the area between Britain and France.
Yes. Yeah.
There would have been civilisations. We've talked about mammoth bones being dragged out of this region. It's not particularly deep even today, but this was land until around 10,000 years ago when it would have flooded. So, and I think people would have known about this. I wonder whether these sort of things, when the sea levels rose that much, would have inspired the Great Deluge, the Great Flood stories, because hundreds of thousands of people potentially would have lived in these regions, and that were then lost to the sea. And you've got like High Brasil or some called Brasil Island, which is just off Ireland. That's another popular theory for where Atlantis is, and there's a lot of Irish myths that are very similar to the like myths like Poseidon and things like this as well, which has been used. But the problem is when the Romans sort of turned up, the Irish kind of adopted and adapted a lot of their myths and their gods and things and the Irish weren't big on writing stuff down. So it looks like some of their stories may have morphed
with the Romans. So you're saying the Celtic tradition you think was more in line with the Greek and then morphed towards the Roman.
They had their myths, and then the Romans turned up and they sort of went, well, because the Romans would have looked like amazing, wouldn't they? Like these guys turned up in armour and stuff. They'd been like, what? So it kind of they sort of took on some of their and it looks like they sort of merged a little bit. But now we look back and we look like, well, that's Poseidon, and it would have. But I think that's where that came from.
Okay.
But that's another. High Brasil appears on loads of maps, but it's now a sunken island. So, and there's loads of myths about it in Irish culture about it being a cloaked island in mist, and you can't get to it, but it appears like one day every 7 years, and reminds me of some myths of King Arthur.
Oh right, okay.
So Avalon is similarly this, that it's covered in mist and it only appears like one day.
Okay. Yeah, I'd have to double check this, but
it just reminds me. My point is, it reminds me of other myths. There are other things that are similar with that are covered in mist and then they only appear for like one day.
I'll have to look into that.
I just think it's interesting how you get these myths that are similar and they
across
seem
multiple
to have
cultures, spanning multiple continents, even. Yeah. And that tends to indicate to me that when you have myths spanning multiple cultures across multiple continents, that there is some kind of true story behind the myth.
It feels like there's a source to it, isn't it?
There has to be a one source, and it's not that these cultures have just made up their own myths that coincidentally happen to be the same. It'd be maybe if one culture and another culture had two myths or had their own mythology where they had a very similar story, but there were some differences. You could say, well, it's possible they had two separate events that happened in two different parts of the world. But you start getting 3, 4, 5 different cultures that are all telling the same story, from a slightly different perspective, but it's from the same single event. Then you start thinking, was it one global event?
Yeah, but when cultures tend to sort of take over other cultures, they do tend to project their beliefs on those people, and
they do.
It's like when we created our empire. You're all Christians now, and all those people in Africa went, what now? We what? We do tend to sort of go, no, we're right, and you're wrong, and I think there possibly an element of that, isn't it? People invading other people and then going, right, now our stories are your stories.
Well, especially when it's enforced by death.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you want to do, Christian or dead?
Yeah.
I'll take Christian, please.
But anyway, we'll come back to that in a minute.
Okay.
But there are other stories that I think are interesting that I think could have possibly inspired Plato. One is that the Black Sea didn't used to be a sea; it used to be a lake.
Yes.
But then basically the Mediterranean burst the banks of that lake and flooded it.
Yep.
The lake more than doubled in size. It would have been very, very rapid as well, but people lived around this lake in large numbers. So that would have been a natural disaster like they've never seen, and those people would have, obviously then moved into other areas, told those stories.
Yeah, completely.
So
yeah.
Plato would have probably known about this. This would have been history. So again, it's something that could have maybe
sparked
influenced
him telling the earlier story, perhaps even. See, when did this supposedly happen? What was it about?
No, it was about 5,600 BC.
Okay, so that would have been 2,000 years before the time of Solon.
Yeah.
And maybe 2,200 years before the time.
I mean, think about 2,000 years even today is a really, really long time for history. We, our history of Christianity and Jesus thing is spotty to say the least.
Yeah, it's vague at best, isn't it?
2,000 years then.
In terms
may
of
as well have been a million years. I mean, isn't it like?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of actual historians actually even referencing the character of Jesus Christ. It's very hard to find many historical records outside of the Bible, outside the Old Testament, and
again, Vatican.
Some of the books
just release the information.
Some of the books, but not many. There's very little. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, but so that's one possibility. You were telling us about the Minoans. That's another thing. That's already more recent. That would have been quite close to Plato's time. I think we're talking about 1600 BC there, aren't we?
I think there's a volcano, isn't there, on the island of Santorini in...
It was a bigger boom.
Which is apparently an island halfway between Greece and Turkey.
Yeah.
And they think the volcanic eruption or an earthquake occurred that led to a volcanic eruption on the island of Santorini that ended up with most of the island being destroyed. The central part of the island being completely destroyed and just leaving a ring around the outside. Yeah. And now it's actually started to form. It started to form the middle point of the island again, where there's a bit of volcanic activity still, a bit of eruption.
The island's actually coming
back.
The
island's reforming again from the eruption in the centre, and that supposedly happened 3,600 years ago, and it's already forming an island again. So that is amazing, isn't it?
Well, so when that explosion went off, that would have been a massive volcanic eruption. So it would have created a tsunami within the Mediterranean. It would have been widespread devastation. The Minoan people were quite advanced at this period. They were even more advanced than the Greeks. There's lots of paintings and pottery and all this sort of thing. So they were an advanced people. This event wiped them off the face of the earth. Any that were left, the Greeks apparently then rocked up and invaded them, and obviously they were just devastated, and the Greeks just took over. But this would have been known to Plato again, and would have potentially inspired
this would have happened in the time of Solon, and Plato's reference to the tale of Atlantis is through the eyes of Solon, who was a few generations before Plato. So perhaps this event occurred in Solon's time, and that's what made him recount the earlier tale of Atlantis.
It just seems to me that
mixed.
This story of the Minoans is very similar to some of the accounts of Atlantis. It seems to me the volcano lost to the sea. It seems to be
an island city lost to the sea. It's not a huge island, Santorini, so it fits with the tale of
potentially
Atlantis being an island. Yeah,
it could have said. Which is possible. Solon could have said it was destroyed, and Plato went, "Well, I know islands and things have been lost to floods, have gone beneath the sea, so maybe that's what filled in the gaps."
I'll fill it in and say it was lost to the sea, when in actual fact,
with information that he knows, and the Greek people would have known this happens as well, so it would make it more believable.
Quite possibly. Well, because I suppose if you think about the time of Plato, supposedly being a few generations after Solon, and Solon was 3,600 years ago, and this island supposedly had the volcanic eruption and was lost to the sea 3,600 years ago, it would have been in the tales or the stories of the living generation of Plato. So he could have made it fit more with that story, the Atlantis story, with a more recent story, just to make it more relevant to the people and for people to understand. Yeah, completely.
But there's lots of examples around the world of these, of us finding cities under the ocean. Right, so there's Pavlo. Right, I'm going to try and get my gob around this. Pavlo Petri.
Yeah, that's not too difficult. Of all of the names of
some reason, some of the words we have to say. Pavlo Petri. So they reckon about 5,000 BC this was lost and under the sea, and they think that was a Minoan city as well.
Yeah.
So again, that's interesting. Even more modern than that, Port Royal. If you love the Pirates of the Caribbean stuff, you know Port Royal, and there was an earthquake, and that went under the ocean, and it's still pretty intact. You can see the stone things. So that's an example of
in modern times the sea reclaiming land.
I think it was 1692 that. So that is, compared to what we're talking about, it's modern times for 50 years. Right. So thanks very much again. If you are new to the channel, please consider liking and subscribing, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah. See you next week.
And then we found it. This is like Troy. It had become myth. And then within my life, it was in the late 80s, we found it. But
yes,
Petra,
that's an interesting city in relation to giant.
Massive doors.
Yeah.
And they had to carve this out of solid things. So you'd think, maybe I'm just lazy, but I'd have built that door as just the size necessary. I'd have measured myself, and that's how much I'd have built that door.